Hello and welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage. It is the eve of Christmas Eve, mid-afternoon. I ventured out of the house twice today and I got hit by two cars. No joke, I got my leg brushed by an old woman in a Honda at the grocery store, putting groceries in my trunk. And then just a few minutes ago at the transfer station, I'm leaning into the back of my Suburban and I get pinned by an old man in a Subaru. It's not safe to leave your house. Stay home or stay in the garage where it's a balmy 46 degrees in here. Don't laugh, that's on purpose. I don't like to sweat when I'm working. It's bad enough in the summertime. It's unavoidable on occasion. But given the choice, if I could see my breath, that'd be okay. But I found over the years, it's definitely way more efficient to heat the shop to a certain temperature and leave it there. I started 55. Last couple years, I've been at 50. And the old heater runs pretty, often. Let's put it that way. It runs quite often. Just on a whim this year, it was almost Thanksgiving by the time I turned it on. I turned it on, it was on 46, and I've left it there, and I am perfectly comfortable, and the heater runs a lot less. The garage, it's been cold the last few nights. I woke up this morning, it was 7 or 8 degrees. The garage kind of hovers just over freezing by itself. It would take a long time for it to get below freezing in here. So 46 this year is a magic number, and again, I am perfectly happy. I'm not freezing to death touching things. Now you people in the South, or depending on where you are in this world, you may think I'm nuts, but hey, it works for me. Today I am checking for pushrod length so I can order them on my 496 engine that I picked up last month. The short block has 2 summers of pulling a Model A around, and the heads I just bought. All these videos are up a few weeks ago. And I've been waiting for enough parts to make a final parts order. Everything always depends on the next item. It's impossible in some areas. There's no way, despite what we're about to talk about, to predict how long the push rods need to be. I often see videos where people buy a kit with, I guess if it came with the cylinder heads, that would give you a clue, but they'll sell you a cam kit with push rods already chosen, especially LS stuff, and without knowing the cylinder head, there's a lot of variables. So in that vein, I bought the Jegs house brand lifters, which are Johnson High Lift, the finest lifters in the land. Boink, boink. Made in USA, says right on them. And they don't come with instructions, but on the Jegs website, Jegs is really good. Got to give them credit for having a link to any instructions. And this is by part number 20810 right here. They tell you your valve train geometry will be affected by lots of things. The deck height of the block, the cylinder head heights, the base circle of the camshaft, the seat height in the lifter, push rod length, of course. That's what we're looking for, the rock around configuration, the pocket and everything else. So the length of the valves, etc. There's a lot of variables to come up with the right length push rod. And what you're trying to do by choosing the right length, when the roller tip does its work, you want to be pushing on the middle of the valve. That's what we're looking for. So despite everything the instructions just said, they went ahead and took a guess by engine family how long they think the push rod's gonna be. So for a 65 to 95 big block Chevy, they suggested the intake push rod would be 7.550. That didn't work for me, because just for kicks, you saw in the opening photo, I have a large dial caliper that I only use for measuring push rod length. I just went ahead and set my adjustable push rod. This is just made for this job we're doing today. I set it for the length they suggested, and it would, well, it looked ugly. It was way this side of the valve, you know, toward the intake manifold, way too short. So then, just for kicks, I set my adjustable push rod checker to the length of a stock. I don't need these anymore. The length of a stock big block Chevrolet low deck 9.8 deck, not a tall deck engine. That's like 8.280, I believe, 8.282. Have to look it up. I have the push rods that are in the photo you saw already. Those are stock big block Chevrolet 3/8 push rods. Way too long. I was way off the other side of the valve. So one last thing. Again, we're just trying to, without taking it apart 40 times and goofing around, the good old, I believe this is a Moroso. I've had this since the 80s. Big block Chevrolet specific. So this fits over the 7/16 stud. Oh, it's a Manly. It says right now it's a Manly. One side is for the exhaust. One side is for the intake, where I have one of these for a small block. And they're all the same because the valves are lined up. So it's all the same. But in this case, a big block Chevy. So you just put the one that says intake pointing down. And I use this as a starting point when it touches the tip of the valve and touches the tip of the push rod. I was just shy of 8 inches. It was like 797. So I made the push rod 8 inches. Took my Sharpie, which we'll do it right now live. We'll paint the end. I just finished adjusting it. You can use, you know, Prussian blue or whatever your flavor is. I have this relatively rare black crane rock-around. Typically crane rock-arounds are yellow. These are on an engine I bought. I think I'm going to use them, and they look brand new almost once I wash them. They've been sitting around for a long time. These are the adjusters I had to buy for my Joe Ma stud girdle, separate, but it works. So you just take it right down. You don't want to compress. Oh, I forgot to mention I have light checking springs on just the intake and exhaust on cylinder number 1. So I took off the normal valve springs and put on these easy to push springs. So the spring in the lifter is stronger than the spring I have on the valve, because I also need to check piston and valve clearance. So you just run this down gently until there's no lash, period. So, and in the position I'm at, my exhaust side of the lifter, it's a tie-bar lifter, so they're tied together, had just started to open. That's when you adjust the intake valve. And when we get to the exhaust, we're gonna let the intake valve open and start to close. As it starts coming up, that means the exhaust is on the base circle of the cam, and we can adjust that. And that's how we adjust all the valves. There's, again, I mentioned the engine forums the other day in a video. Somebody was asking how to put the distributor in. Somebody else asked how to adjust the valves. Again, these small blocks have been up since 1955, big block Chevy since 65. Nothing's changed. But for all engines in the land, you know, exhaust opening, intake closing, per cylinder, all you got to do when the exhaust valve starts to move, adjust the intake. When the intake goes all the way down, starts to close, adjust the exhaust, and move on. You can chase the firing order. You can go right down the cylinder head, whatever you want to do. I'm sitting here with a ratchet. There's nothing to it. So I painted my valve. We're going to crank it over twice. I'm probably out of the picture, but just going to let the roller tip make a mark on the valve. There's one. We'll keep cranking. I guess I could put a drill on the engine and really spin it, but no need. There it goes again. It's closing, and now I'm going to watch for the exhaust side of the lifter for cylinder number 1 to start coming up. It just did. Take my rocker back off. And let me grab you. And we'll see the mess that we made. I'll try not to make you sick. See the mark? Dead center on the valve. So the intake push rod length is 8 inch. And this is with the cylinder head on the engine, and I'm using the old head gasket that the guy gave me that owned the engine before. so I can have the part number. It comes in handy in this situation to just take up space. Okay, now let's start the procedure to check the exhaust push rod. So step one, I need to put it so the intake valve is closing. Just watching the lifter, intake's going up, intake's coming down. I had to go get my longer of the two checkers. For the intake one, I had actually taken the nuts off because it's easier, but in this case, I can put them down. It's adjustable this way. The nuts just get in the way. I don't need to tighten it up. I'm not going to run the engine like this. So these cylinder heads strongly suggest you have to run a 3/8 diameter push rod. In a big block Chevy, 3/8 is stock, 454 in your truck. Performance engine had a 7/16 push rod, and some people run up to a 1/2 inch push rod or bigger. So, but in this case, the way the cylinder head and the ports are, you have to run a 3/8 push rod. They suggest a .120 wall tubing push rod. Normal push rods are either 0.60 or .080, so that's a pretty thick push rod. I haven't shopped for them yet, but I'm taking my checker, exhaust arrow pointing down, put it on the stud, just adjust so we're tight. Right there. We can take it right off. We'll paint the valve with my Sharpie. Again, anything that's going to leave a mark, but not permanently, I find the Sharpie works really well. You can let it dry too. It'll probably scratch its way in there. Thread it on so we're at 0 lash. Right there. Everything stops, everything's happy. Let's roll it over twice. There goes one. There goes two. I'm gonna go all the way back to the lifter on the intake side. Goes up and starts to come back down. We're back where we can adjust it. Back to 0 lash, nothing changed. Looks nice, and all you gotta do now is measure for the push rod. Let me do that. And we're back. I removed the push rod on the exhaust side. That was a length we determined by this tool and measured it, and I was close to the dimensions both between I have a stock intake and exhaust push rod on the bench. This 1 inch difference pretty much. Indicated here in the suggestions, the difference between the intake and exhaust push rods are also 1 inch. I was almost 1 inch as indicated by the tool, so I went ahead and made it the full inch difference. So couldn't be any simpler of an 8 inch push rod on the intake, a 9 inch push rod on the exhaust. And what I've learned with the Sharpie, marking it this way, when it's right, it makes a defined line like I showed you on the intake side, right dead center on the valve, plus you can watch it from the side. So it would be acceptable with this, and I found in the past that this is get you close, isn't always 100%. So I'm much happier where I'm at now. So now, let's just say I had my push rods. And while I'm goofing around here, I'm also going to check my piston to valve clearance. I haven't done that yet. I'm rotating the engine and nothing's hitting, but I still want to know how much clearance I have. I don't anticipate a problem, but while I have the light springs on it, I'm going to do that. You can do it two ways. You can, walk around and just keep pushing the valve down, hitting the piston as you're rolling it over. You can measure how much you got there, or you can put, Play-Doh on the top of the piston and roll it over, and that'll tell you everything you need to know, including what this won't tell you is your piston to head clearance. if you're tight in any spot. So I'm going to actually put Play-Doh on it, put the head back on, roll it over, pull it off, and just peek at it. Couldn't be any simpler. So let's pretend we have all the parts. The cylinder heads are on for real. Now we're going to adjust the valves. So I already know that I'm on in the position to adjust the exhaust valve because my intake valve, my lifter is closing. The valve has been all the way open and it's starting to close. So I could put my rocker arm on because I'm going to lube it. When checking for the push rod length, nobody tells you to determine or add for the amount that you're going to depress the plunger in the push rod, which is what we're going to do in this step. So as far as push rod length goes, apparently nobody worries about it. I'm not going to. But to set the plunger depth, right back down to 0 lash, which when everything's new and clean and easy, I mean, you know you're there, right there. The Johnson lifter site where I went to and the instructions here kind of contradictory, but they want preload of 0.030. They want you to move the plunger down on the push rod. You can see it because these are hydraulic roller lifters. They want you to move it down from 0, 30 thousandths. So how do you do that? Well, if you go to any machinist guide or just Google it, there's a 7/16 fine thread. It'll tell you how far it travels per inch. Excuse me, per turn. So every turn you advance the nut so much. And in this case, one turn would move down 50 thousandths. So that's too much. We're only going to go 30. The instructions here tell you to go 3/4 of a turn, but that's more than 30 thousandths. Half a turn is not enough. So I actually did all the math on my little calculator, but if I go 5/8 of a turn from 0, I am at 30 thousandths or as close as you can probably get. So that's what I'm going to do. Same thing. Then you'd roll it around till the exhaust starts to crack. Do the intake for number 1 cylinder, wherever you start on, and then you can just go cylinder by cylinder. You can follow the firing order if you want to. You typically am doing one head at a time right here, so I'll just go right down the line. I'll turn the engine a few more times, but I don't care. So that way I know, and I just love when you're adjusting things and you can feel everything's right. It's a good feeling. I love working on engines. I was surprised at the amount of cleaning I had to do on all these brand new parts, but you know, that's the way it goes, including the cylinder heads that are full of styrofoam and everything. But all right, it's getting dark. Christmas is coming up. Stay safe out there. People are crazy. I'm glad I didn't get crushed today. I'm still walking, no broken bones. Quite a story. The dump attendants come running over because you know, I'm mad. I'll lose my mind, right? I wasn't rude, but basically I'm like, what the hell? And yeah, the story ensues from there, but I was fine. I am fine. Everything's fine. And have a fine Christmas. Talk to you soon.